I got my new baby. One of the things I like, if you pay attention to the chrome right there in the reflection, you can see that it's purple on the box to match the actual phone itself. So as I'm driving home, I'll go ahead and tell you guys, the reason that I held off on upgrading my iPhone 11 Pro Max to the 12 or 13 was I just didn't see enough changes. I didn't see enough reason to actually make the upgrade. However, with the 14 Pro Max, I gotta admit, this thing is damn beautiful. And I want to talk about it. Hey, what's up guys? I'm Callaway Jones and welcome to my iPhone 14 Pro Max review. Let's get into it. So this year's iPhone is running on an A16 4nm chip with 6 gigs of RAM, and it actually doesn't matter because it is miles ahead of all the competition. So much so that Apple compared it to previous iPhones because every Android out there is still trying to catch up to the iPhone 11 Pro Max 3 generations ago. So it's fast. Can you see the difference? Can you feel the difference? I don't think so. I honestly think since the A14, this thing's just been so damn snappy. At this point, it is just overkill beyond overkill. Now, let's go ahead and talk about some of my favorite features on this new phone. And the first one I'm going to talk about is the SOS feature, because I honestly think over the coming year, we're going to hear about this feature actually saving lives. So what the SOS feature does in the iPhone 14 is even when you have no signal at all, you are actually able to connect to satellites passing overhead and get out a signal just enough to tell somebody via message, which they have preset messages. If you have food or if you have water, how much water you have left, perhaps there's someone you need them to contact. It's an incredible and outstanding feature, and this took years and years to get right and partnerships in order for it to work. I think this is actually going to save lives. Imagine yourself being out in the desert, being up in the mountains. Perhaps you're in a small plane and you crash out in the mountains and you just have zero signal. You're going to be able to connect now. It might not be for a long time, but it will be enough, maybe just enough, to save your life. And speaking of which, another one of their really great features this year that I think is also going to be saving a lot of lives in the coming years is their auto detection of a car accident. Now, this isn't just guessing if you've been in a car accident or not. Apple has actually run tens of thousands of tests and have accumulated all this data that they are working with, and not just physical data, but audio data, not just the gyroscope, but how different accidents sound. Puts all of this data together using AI to detect and know if you've actually been in a car accident. And it will ask you, and if you don't respond, it will assume you are unconscious or unable to get to your phone, and it will contact the authorities and call an ambulance and tell them your exact location and get help for you right away. And personally, I think this is incredible. On to the fun stuff. Another feature that I really love is the new eSIM card. Now this, first of all, let me just start by saying this. I know this is an unpopular opinion amongst tech YouTube. I personally think this is great. I'm a futurist and I'm always on board when Apple decides to push things forward, even when people are uncomfortable with it. Back to the eSIM. So one of the things I love so much about the eSIM is you get two. That's right, you can have 2 phone numbers on one phone. And for me, I think that's fantastic because now I can have my work calls and I can have my personal calls coming in routed to the same phone. This is great for people like myself. I've been using Google Voice numbers for years and years and years. Now I can finally just have 2 numbers running to the same phone. Also, you don't have to deal with anybody in stores. Think about how awesome that is. Let's say you want to switch from Verizon to T-Mobile or vice versa, or wherever you want to go. Now you can just go on your phone and have it done in seconds. Now we're getting to my favorite things, starting with the fact that this camera is now 48 megapixels. And while that may not seem like a big deal, for people that do photography and filmmaking, it's huge. The iPhone has always been industry leading and the industry standard when it comes to cameras. In fact, the iPhone for the past decade has been the #1 and most used camera on the planet. However, this is because they're so good with hardware to software integration, and they're always able to push their technology to make their images that much sharper, that much more pleasant to look at. However, with a 48 megapixel sensor, that allows us to have much more detail. We can zoom in more, we can get sharper images, we'll be able to use these images for print, on billboards, etc. But most importantly for someone like me, a filmmaker, this unlocks the ability to do certain things that they couldn't do before, such as action mode. For anybody that shoots short films, feature films, commercials, etc., a lot of times when you're filming action and you're in the heat of the moment, you're actually going to be able to have somebody pull out their iPhone 14 Pro, throw that bad boy into action mode, and they'll be able to grab all the action while moving around, and it'll still be silky smooth. And they're able to do that because of the stabilization feature. Now, admittedly, it crops your image down to 2.8K. However, 2.8K is still a lot, and the image looks great. I'm going to be using this all the time, and I'm sure a lot of you will as well. I mean, you basically have a B cam in your pocket, and that is powerful. Speaking of which, ProRes, which was introduced on the phone last year, is now capable of 4K 30 frames per second in ProRes RAW, another huge deal for filmmakers like myself. Speaking of which, I think Apple's holding off on doing 8K because right now 8K on phones still sucks. Look at any other phone that's doing 8K, it is unstable as hell. I don't think Apple's going to introduce this feature to the iPhone until it can be just as smooth as shooting in 4K. Hey, look, Apple is late to the table very often, but they're always the first ones to get it right, and that's where it really counts. And my favorite thing about this phone, I'm not even gonna lie, the dynamic island. And oh mama, this thing is gonna be copied and copied and copied to Kingdom Come over the coming year, and it should be. What an incredible feature, regardless of how the name sounds. By the way, I'm coining a new term for it, and you heard it here first. I'm just gonna be calling it the DI. And guess what? I bet you will too now. Everyone's gonna be calling it the DI. Just remember, you heard it here first. Now, let me tell you what's so special about the DI. This thing blobs and pokes and pulls and separates and splits into two and sometimes three, and it's just all over the place, and it's so fluid and it's so beautiful. And you're gonna ask yourself, why hasn't anyone thought of this before? Well, one company did, and they tried it years ago. Any guesses as to who? If you think you know, leave it in the comments below. Now, as of right now, there are over 100 different functionalities that the DI can perform, and that list is only going to continue to grow because Apple did release the API for this functionality to developers. So be on the lookout because that thing is going to be popping up everywhere. And I'll tell you what, once you've experienced the DI, you will never want to go back. And I mean that. Do I think that it's reason enough to buy a new phone? For someone like me, yes. But I like to be on the bleeding edge of technology. Do I think you should? Well, that also depends on the other things that I talked about. If the majority of these things seemed important to you, then yes, you should be picking up this phone, even if you had an iPhone 13. However, if these things just seem cool, but not really necessary, you can go ahead and skip this one. That said, if you're coming from a 12 or 11 or even a 10, absolutely. Pick it up, go out, reserve it, do what you gotta do, but get your hands on this thing right now. Well, that's gonna do it for me this time, you guys. Thanks for sticking around through my review. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.